back off. I'll get done when I get done. Okay, don't forget that we will have, towards the end of the class, we're going to have a little in-class assignment in case you forgot. Talk to your neighbor real quick. Okay, and today we're going to be talking about ethnicity and nationalism, which dovetails, of course, immediately on race. The reason? You know why? Because race and ethnicity are not the same thing. Right? Race is biological seed traits that are about clusters of where you're adapted to live, right? Your levels. Now, ethnicity is something really different. Ethnicity and nationalism are a great deal of our identity, and they're also extraordinarily important. People change nationalities, right? They may give up citizenship in one place and become a national somewhere else, but do they give up their ethnicity? Typically not. We often struggle with issues of ethnicity on a constant basis. So here's the question: do we choose our ethnicity? In a sense, yes. Right? In a sense, yes, and in a sense, no. Where is the in a sense no? Who tells you what your ethnicity is? Your parents, right? Okay, so let's use the example of Spencer again because that's the one I got. It's the only person, the only primate I raised from an egg. When he was small, he used to tell everyone he was French. And the reason he told everybody he was French was that that's what his dad would say. His dad would say, "We are French." And French was only one of many things that they were. They were also Scottish, and they were Swedish, and his dad liked French best. He spoke a little French, and so he was like, "We are French." And when he got to be a little older, I was like, "No, you're wrong about your ethnicity, son. You are not French, you are German." And he says, "Well, I'm only half German." And I'm like, "No, actually, you're more than that. Because some of your dad's people are also German. So if you weigh it all, if it was a giant pile of weight, if every time you had, if you called ethnicity, it was worth 10 ounces, you have more ounces of German than you have anything else. Plus, your dad's people, well, half of them came over as indentured servants because they lost a war. I like to say it was because they were debtors, but Spencer did correct me on that. And the other half came over on the Mayflower. So does it get any more American than I got on the boat, came here, and started a country? No, that's as American as it gets. But interesting enough, not the first answer. Most people, when you are asked, what is your ethnicity, you don't say American. That's your nationality, right? It's not your ethnicity. Now, if you travel somewhere else, you go to a different country. They say, "Are you American?" You always say, "Yeah." Right? We're really obvious. I will tell you, I've tried to fake it. Oh, yes, I have. When I was 14, I was so embarrassed to be an American. It's so funny, I've been embarrassed to be German, I was embarrassed to be American. I was on a train to Switzerland, and I was visiting some friends in Switzerland. The friends of my mom, really. But I got several trains. And in Germany, the train cars are like they look on Harry Potter, like they're those 6 seats and they face each other and they have a little door, right? And they had smoking compartments and non-smoking compartments, and I was, 14 and no good. And so I have the window open, I'm reading a book, I'm wearing a very black suit like my soul. Right? It's my suit, but it is wool, and it is, and I'm very much, if you can imagine Winona Ryder in Beetlejuice, this is me at 14, right? And the world is sad, and the world is tragic. I mean, I was almost French, right? So I'm sitting there smoking and reading, and this couple opens the door to walk in. And I kid you not, he is wearing a Hawaiian shirt, shorts, sandals with white socks. He has a camera hanging from his neck. She is wearing white tennis shoes. They are huge. And some sort of very polyester, ill-fitting clothing. And they walk in and he says, Martha, look at that window. Right? Look at that window. I bet you that church right there is older than our whole country. Oh, this is great, Martha. And she says, yes, dear. And he walks in and, he is in a train leaving Germany, heading for Switzerland. And he says, are these seats taken? Now, there's a little thing in the window that says who's sitting where. Right? And it says there's nobody in the slot there. What you do is look at the window and you can see there are people in the places where there are slots, and there are empty slots with no people in them. And he looks at me and he goes, do you speak English? And I said, oh, Entschuldigung, ich spreche kein English. And the other two people in the train with me look up and look at me. And I look back down. And the guy's like, let's go see if we can find an empty one. And he slides the door closed and keeps going. And the two people sitting across from me pick their head up and they go, in English, why did you pretend not to speak English? And I said, why didn't you answer them? And they said, well, they were one of your countrymen, why didn't you help them? And I said, I don't know what you're talking about, I'm Canadian. And they were like, no, you're not, you're American. I said, I am not. And they said, no Canadian would dress like that. And the best part was, remember I said I was reading a book? It was in English. Right? I'm holding a book in English in my lap. And I said, well, clearly they were dumb. I'm holding a book in English. And they both looked at me and they said, so you're embarrassed to be an American? I said, I still don't know what you're talking about. I'm Canadian. When I got to Switzerland, I found a Canadian flag patch. I sewed it to my purse. Because I was like, that's it, if I just wear a Canadian patch, everyone will think I'm Canadian. Nobody believed me ever that I was Canadian. Apparently, I just exude American all over, even without speaking. And I was like, how is that possible? I didn't talk. I wasn't wearing the white tennies. I was just reading in a corner and not talking to anybody. But they knew. They just knew. Now, when I'm out of the country, obviously, my ethnicity includes American, right? They have ideas about what I want to eat, what I think about the world, how I approach problems, my values, my beliefs, all of those things. American, right? But when we're here, if somebody says, what are you? You don't answer American, do you? What do you answer? Whatever it is your parents told you are. Right? And you'll be able to modify that as you get older and get further away from your parents and be like, well, we're Chilean and Chinese. I think I'll be Chinese, right? Or whatever, you can pick. And it will be situational. You'll decide when you want to do that. So ethnicity has a lot more fluidity to it. So, when we say ethnicity as anthropologists, we actually are specifically referring to cultural values. Cultural values that people associate with a specific place. We're talking about how people define who they are has a lot to do with where they think they come from. Now, when Spencer claims being French, or when his father claims being French, the last person who was French was almost 300 years ago. Right? And I'm like, no, that's too long back. I say, I claim being German because my mom came here as an adult. Right? My mom emigrated from Germany here. Now, my father's side, I think of him as American. I actually think of him as Ohio. Like, not just America as a whole. That boy's from Ohio. And he doesn't even say Ohio, he says Ahia. Right? He does his washing in the creek, and he puts Earl on his salad. Oil. Oh. Yeah, I know, right? It took me a while too. And a creek is a creek, and washing is washing. Ah, that's the way my grandmother spoke. His mother, absolutely, she spoke like that. She did her worship in the creek, and she had all this weird thing, weird ways of saying things. She was born in Ohio, right? She was American, but her dad wasn't. Her dad was from Ireland. Okay, but I don't identify as Irish. That's the next people back. The people after that are Swedish. And the people on the dad's side, they're all German. My dad's dad was born here, but that was it. Everybody else, Germans. So I identify as German. I could pick Irish. What day do I pick being Irish? St. Patrick's Day, right? That is Kiss Me I'm Irish Day. That's the day when I feel my greens, right? Now, I love Ireland, don't get me wrong. I visited, I love it. I could fall in love 1,000 times in that city, Dublin. I could fall in love 1,000 times. Every time someone turns around and says, oh, pardon me, I go, right?
I could marry you. You just talk all day, it would be fine for me, right? That'd be fine.
But I'm not really that, right? This is, by the way, an ethnic parade in New York. So when we answer this as a group, we say, okay, it's a sense of our historical past, which is what I was getting to. Sometimes our ancestral connection, right? The people we were born to. And we see us as being distinct from other groups until you say, oh, I share the same historical connection. I share the same ancestral heritage. Now, when am I most ethnically German? Without a shadow of a doubt, at Christmas. Christmas is when I just deeply become German. And the reason I deeply become German is, well, my mom comes for Christmas, and I have to do things the German way, or it's not Christmas. This included last year cooking goose, which I will never, ever do again. Yes, the Christmas goose. That's a European dish. Eat the goose. They don't eat the turkey. The turkey's a European thing. Never cooking goose again. But, you know, the songs we sing, even our tree, which alarms the rest of my family, by the way. Our tree sends everybody into apoplectic shock. I'm German. Our tree must have candles. So there's nothing like having this tree you've had since the day after Thanksgiving, right? Which is, you know, a tree is basically a big bouquet of flowers that you stuck in a dish, and it got dry, and then I light candles on the tree, begging for danger. I think our Christmas has a little element of danger in it. Now, truth be told, I never get my Christmas tree right after Thanksgiving because my birthday falls in the middle of December. And I have a very strict, oh no, Christmas, you wait until I'm done. So, you know, trees may be purchased on the 17th of December, but not before, not ever, no. Christmas is not a big, you know, Halloween can start in August, I'm fine with that. But Christmas, shut up, you do not enter my world until after the 17th of December. That's it. So, it hasn't been that long, but we sing a little song, and the way it's supposed to happen is everybody gets kicked out of the house, and they go for a walk, and while they go for a walk with Mom, they're supposed to light all the candles and bring all the presents out from hiding, and you put them under the tree, and they come back from their walk to this lovely blazing tree, hopefully not literally, and then you open your presents, and all your presents get opened on Christmas Eve. You have one present that comes from Santa, and you get that the next, of course, because he came overnight, you get that the next day. Right? This is the way it works. When my dad and my mom split up, when my dad married my stepmom, they did Christmas on Christmas Day. Like they won. They opened one present on Christmas Eve, and only because I had a complete meltdown. Because I was so excited about Christmas Eve, and then there were no presents to open. And I was like,
Is that And I actually said to her, so you ripped my father out of my life, and now you kill Christmas? Oh yeah, it's kind of like being 9 and being very sure of yourself. Yeah, she eventually gave in, and I was sad because I was kind of hoping that I had found the big Christmas present, but I didn't. I got like a Nerf football, and I was like, this is the saddest day ever. And I kept yelling at them, but we're German! Germans do it this way! And my stepmom was like, we're Swedish, we don't do it this way. I'm like, no, your people are supposed to do it for like 25 days. It already started. You're late! She's like, don't tell me about my people. You don't know anything about my people. I'm like, I've been there. Have you? I'm 9. I've been to Sweden. How about you? No, of course not. Yeah. I consider it an affront to my ethnicity. So, this is a part of our identity. Now, when we think of America, we talk about it as this big, melting pot, right? Where all of our ethnic identities and they all come together and we all become one. That would be really sad, y'all. That would be horrible. I kind of think of that as like all of us coming together and making beige. Right? Like the world would just be beige. That's just not how it is, right? We embrace and love our ethnicity, right? Very few of us have ethnic shame. Most of us have ethnic pride. It's in the foods we eat. It may not be in the clothes we choose to wear. We've homogenized that. If you look around this room, we are decidedly Americans, right? You can tell in our shoes, you can see in our clothes, also in sometimes our lack of clothes. I just saw a Facebook post that made me laugh. It said Santa was looking through your Facebook pictures and for Christmas he's getting you clothes and a Bible. That's funny. So when we look at ethnic pride, it's on the rise, but it's not always appropriate in every location, right? I'm not going to come to school wearing a wool dress with a little bar across with a very white shirt that's only this. I don't know if you realize that in all those women's, like, they look like they're doing the Edelweiss thing. The shirt ends here. It doesn't, I don't know why in a cold climate you wouldn't have a whole shirt, but you don't get a whole shirt. It ends here, and it's got little short sleeves. It's called a danbo, which is actually just the German word for dress, and it ties in and makes us hold it. I don't come to school wearing that. I own it. Well, of course I own it. When my grandmother died, she gave me her dresses. I own them, but I'm not doing it. And there's even different versions of it. There's the one you wear as a house dress, like that you're cleaning in, and there's one that you wear for parties, and there's all these different versions. Some of you at home have, all kinds of ethnic clothing. You may have a sari in your closet. I have one of those too. Well, weddings. Saris are great for weddings, especially a really nice red one. And you may have a, how do I forget what it's called? Someone help me. It's a white dress. It's typical of Maya from like mid-Mexico through Honduras. It's the white dress with the embroidery on it. You know it. Your grandma wore one, right? Like you know what I'm talking about. It's called a huicho or huicho. I forgot the heck what it's called. Anybody want to help me? It's got a name, like a white abeta for men. What is it called for women? Okay, fine. Just pretend. There's got to be at least 3 of you in here who know. So, our ethnic identity is, of course, growing more and more powerful. Now, one thing that causes us confusion, much the same way as it did in race, is we often intertwine our ethnic identity with our religious identity. These things come together as well. So we may have conflict that would not be there otherwise, but because in most religions the rule is that I am the God, not a God, and if you guys have different the gods, you already have a problem. So, that can cause kinds of conflicts, and we're watching people die doing that. And you know that in the 1930s to the 1940s, over 6 million Jews, and then a whole bunch of other folks, Gypsies, for example, that's an ethnicity. They don't call themselves Gypsy, but they are the travelers. And they were also murdered for their ethnicity. So it's kind of a big deal. So it's really very much a cultural construction. It isn't about your biology. This is not at all about your biology. You don't look in your face and decide what you are. That's not what you do. Especially not people with European descent. You don't look at your face and decide what you are. But your ethnicity is taught to you. I didn't inherently know I had to light a Christmas tree on fire for it to be Christmas. Right? You have to learn your culture, and as you learn your culture, your ethnic identity goes hand in hand with that. You learn your culture at school, you learn your ethnic identity at home, and with your friends, and sometimes through school stuff, right? Because we have these little programs at school where they're like, they celebrate a certain ethnicity at a certain time. You may have a Native American Heritage Day where people come and tell you about what it means to be Native American. Or you may have I don't know why they focus so much on a Cinco de Mayo, because that's not actually the Independence Day, but you may have a Cinco de Mayo Day, or more likely, more recently, you're going to have a Day of the Dead Day. I'm very excited. I love the Day of the Dead. I love it so much. I feel so welcome. Dr. Death as I am, I feel so welcome on the Day of the Dead. I love doing ceremonies, dances, and other things. They make me happy. I even managed to, 2 years ago, pull off a very robust Day of the Dead celebration here at Norgo. It was awesome.
Let's do it again.
We did face painting and sugar cookies, and we didn't only celebrate the Hispanic version, we also celebrated the Haitian version. So it was very nice. So we really had a very good time. So, if you have something learned, right, that means it has to be more than individual personality, right? There has to be a set of beliefs, or at least agreed upon understandings. When we set this set of beliefs, we call this origin myths. Now, origin myths does not mean it is not true. Myth in anthropology means an explanation of why things are the way they are. It doesn't weigh in on truth or non-truth of it. It's just an explanation of why things are the way they are. So in this case, an origin myth. Sometimes the origin myth is fictive, right? That you identify as this group because someone told you belong to this group, and you continue to identify with this group, right? Like dad in French, right? Fictive. Sometimes there's a whole story, maybe your family's migration story. It may be part true, it may be all true, but it's part of your story. Sometimes the origin myths are religious, right? So my husband is ethnically Jewish, but not practicing. He sees himself as ethnically Jewish. He actually defines himself as Jewish. It's Jewish. Because of ancestral passages in this, right? So because his grandmother is Jewish and his mother didn't know she was Jewish but is, right? How can you not know your religion, right? It's not, because they actually see it as an ethnic identity more than a religion. So these end up being these very key stories that define your ethnicity, right? When people ask you about your ethnicity, you will present these key stories as the explanation of your ethnicity, right? I had to explain to you, my mom came over as an adult. my dad's dad was German, my dad's mom, a bunch of things. So well, we see ourselves as Germans, right? And so this is all part of the key story. For me, I tell you who my migrant was, especially because we come from all of us come from migrants, right? I mean, well, unless you're Native American. And then your migrant story is much older. It's still a migrant story because it turns out North America doesn't breed people. People arrive. So we have these migrant stories, these stories of how we got to be here, and they're a very important part of our ethnic identity. So these key stories is how we legitimize our claim to our ethnicity. That's one of the things. How do you prove your ethnicity? You can't, because ethnicity is how you see yourself. It may have nothing to do with actual migrations or biology or anything. It's very culturally constructed. So I'll tell you a story. There was a woman who was a state senator in Massachusetts. And when she was she was actually at Harvard for a while as an administrator at Harvard. And when she became a state senator, a newspaper got a hold of her story and lambasted her for claiming to be Native American. She looks very white, so they decided that she couldn't be Native American because she looked white. And they can't do that, right? You just can't do that. Her ethnicity is what it is. And so they made her tell her key stories, her origin myths, to explain why she chose Native American as her ethnicity on her job occupation at Harvard. And she said, well, my understanding is that my mother's father was a Native American who had migrated across this spot, and my mother's mother was not, but we see ourselves very strongly as Cherokee, and we retain this as part of our understanding of our ethnicity. Totally valid, totally valid. But the world as a whole doesn't get that because they constantly conflate race and ethnicity. They put these two things together and they can impossible to pull apart when it's actually two completely different things. So we have these boundary markers that help us with our ethnicity. Now obviously, we're not using clothing, but we definitely know that when you present in certain clothing, you're presenting a certain ethnic identity, right? You are presenting what you're associating with. So we see this kind of markers or these kinds of identity flags around the world. In some places, it's so significant that only certain clothing can only be worn by certain people, and they're indicating their ethnicity always based on this particular style of dress, and it would be quite silly for them to dress any other way. If you look at the Aymara, for example, they're in the Andes in South America. The Aymara, if you are an Aymara woman, you are going to have two braids, for sure, one on each side. You will braid your hair in two braids, split down the middle. Everybody wears their hair the same way. You will wear a bowler hat. We don't know when it migrated into the Andes, but the English bowler hat. You know the hat I'm talking about? Like the one with the round cap that goes like this? You will wear this hat. It can vary in color, but it will be a bowler hat. You will wear a skirt. In fact, you will wear many, one on top of the other. Right? And this indicates you are Aymara. This says, I am Aymara. If you took that woman and flew her to New York, she would still, this is me, I am Aymara, until somebody's like, oh, you should dress like a then she might tone it down a bit, but she certainly, as soon as she gets home, I am Aymara. This is what we wear. So this may even extend into the way we talk, patterns of speech. I have a friend who is Caucasian, in, well, her biology says, I'm adapted to live in a very cold climate. She's very, very, very pale, including her hair. She's got that straw-colored hair and really light eyes and freckles. But she was raised in East LA. And her family had a house in East LA. She was raised in East LA. When you hear her talk, she speaks Spanish. Right? Her cadence is the way she speaks English as if she were speaking Spanish. She also cannot start a sentence or a letter. She can't start a sound without making an it on it. So if it's spaghetti, it's a spaghetti. Right? She always has to do this. And people argue that she's fronting the wrong ethnic identity. She's fronting the wrong ethnic identity, which is not actually true. Right? She, by the way, if you ask her how she sees herself, she says she's Mexican. And you ask her, why do you see yourself as Mexican? And she says, all of my friends, all of the people I consider my family, they're Mexican. I'm Mexican. And she's never even been to Mexico, and none of her family is from Mexico. She's Mexican. Can you argue with her? No, actually, as it turns out, you can't. Her food preferences, everything, it's all absolutely Mexican. So, of course, depending on the cultural constructs, though, or the context itself, we may have, this is a little too romantic in here, we may shift it, right? If you belong to an ethnicity that falls into disfavor, for example, you may not define yourself that way. During the 1970s, we had multiple conflicts in Iran and in the 1980s. At that point, it became unacceptable to have Iranian as your ethnic background. You were never Iranian, you were Persian. And that worked. So they shifted their association and became Persian. Other times, you may see people assimilating into the culture around them and discarding the culture from before. This is a forced assimilation. So sometimes it's forced, like forced assimilation. Native Americans, for example, they were stuck in reservations and they were putting them in English-only schools, and the government was actively driving out all of the things that were part of their ethnic identity. They were going to, as they call it, mainstream. And as a result, language was lost, culture, we end up with this cultural loss. And so the identification of many people who would have identified ethnically with a certain native group identify with the state they're from. You know, hey, are you Blackfoot? No, I'm from Wyoming. Right, so you end up with this very negotiated ethnic identity. So it is playing a background role in your life the whole time. So here, we're looking at the passport of this guy. He's from Rwanda, right? This is his ID. And if you look, it says that he is male. I have to look at this over here closer because it's a little bit fuzzy. Basically, it says that he's male, but if you look at his ethnic identity, he's no longer, because Rwanda was unsafe, right? He no longer identifies as the native group that he belonged to before, which was here. No longer, now he's something else. It's safer for him. Now, when we, in our daily lives, in everything we do, we actually interact with our ethnicity all the time. From the choices of the foods we make, right? What we like to eat, what we think is, what we want to do with our afternoon, all of that is actually interacting with our ethnicity. When you go to school, you checked an ethnic box. You put an application in, you said, I am this, right? We are here at Northmore College, which is a Hispanic serving institution. which means that a certain percentage of our population identifies as Hispanic. And there are activities and resources that are directed specifically at this college because of that.
Are you saying our individual preferences were always created through our ethnicity?
A lot of our preferences are. It's about what is considered normal. Now, some of it is not as cartoony as that sounds. It's not like, hey, I'm from El Salvador, all I ever want, rice and beans. That's not what I'm saying. But certain flavors are a regular part of home ethnic food, and they become to us normal flavors. And so when we start branching out into eating other foods, we still tend towards a food palette that is very similar to what was comfortable to us at home. So I love sausage. I do. I have to admit it. I love sausage. I love sauerkraut. I love these flavors. So mustard is fantastic. And this is actually funny because I was raised by a vegetarian. My mom, when she came to the U.S., she just was like, German, nothing, hippie, yeah! And no salts, no preservatives, none of that. But I came to associate those kinds of flavors. But when we go get a hamburger, because we are Americans, that is also food. We don't say American food, right? When you go to Denny's, there are no other choices but American food, right? And we say, okay, that's food. Now, when you eat something else, let's say you go have sushi.
That was Americanized.
We did. You could actually, the difference between Japanese sushi and American sushi is a tragedy. They would, mayo? Mayo? We put mayo on everything and they did it to fish. Ew! And avocado? Like, the California fruit, right, is avocado. Go to a sushi bar, I dare you, count things that have mayo and avocado in them. And you will find it's like 95% of the menu. Even that little orange sauce that's like it's mayo with chilies in it. It's still mayo, man. And that's because that's what Americans eat. That's part of our taste pattern. It is. Yeah, there's a whole way to eat it. It's beautiful. It has nothing to do with what we do. Nothing to do with it. But we won't eat it otherwise because this is how our ethnicity sort of interacts with what we do. It's not conscious, right? It's not something where we go, I won't eat that unless it has mayo on it, right? We just do it.
Just like how we said.
No, ethnicity is very real. The thing you have to recognize is it's very fluid. That's the part. Race is not fluid. Ethnicity is very fluid. And it is very culture constructed, but don't let that for a second, because it's culture constructed, make you believe that it is not a real thing. Go on. Try not having one for a day. You know, if you don't feel like, oh, well, if we culture construct what it means, if our identity is fluid, well, then I guess I can just have it any way I want. Okay, when we start talking about gender, go ahead, we're going to try the same kind of fluidity. We have the same rigidity towards ethnicity that we have towards gender. You are a thing, or you aren't a thing, right? So, I mean, just for fun, I dare you to try it. Don't have an ethnicity. Try not having one. See how that works out for you. If somebody says, what are you? I'd like you to answer American. Or, you know what, go ahead and answer human. They will keep at you. Yeah, of course we're all human. Where are you from? Planet Earth. How about you? Right? That you watch people just no, because they're defining how they're interacting with you based on your answer. They don't know how to interact with you without you giving them the clues of what they're supposed to think. So it's very real. It's very much a part of your lives. It may even affect whether or not you get a job. In both ways. Someone may decide your ethnicity does these things. Like people will say, oh, Germans, we're always on time. And we have weird porn. Germans are obsessed with the pooping and all of that. It's not funny because it's true. It's gross.
You ruined
It's true. But you know. There's a name that Germans call their children that you would never use that in English.
Yeah.
Like never. Little German kids, you can call them kleine Hosenscheißer, which is little pants pooper, and that's adorable, right? A little kid poops in their pants, that's adorable, so you call the little pants pooper. If you said that to an American kid, you'd be like, and then the therapy bills, oh, I can see them coming now. My mom talked about my pants pooping in front of everyone, right? So, totally different. So, yeah, we're a little bit weird. We make assumptions about how people think about how you approach things. When I am constantly on time, okay? I have to be on time. It kills me. It kills me to be late. To me, if I'm not 15 minutes early, I am late. Right? It must be on time. My husband goes, chickens. Right? He couldn't be on time to save his life. Right? I mean, they joke about they'll be late to their own funeral, but no, really. He's going to be late to his own funeral. And he's like, what? I'm on island time. That's when he's Cuban, right? And I'm like, no, I've met Cuban people who could be on time. You are not Cuban, you are you. But his whole family's like that. His whole family, his graduation, his college graduation, his mom was an hour late. Right? Our wedding, I lied to everyone. Our wedding, I was like, we're getting married at 6. The building wasn't even open at 6. I knew they wouldn't show up at 6 and be standing outside being like, I don't know what happened. So, we got married at 8 o'clock. At 7:45, Abe walks his mom. His sister, who was in the wedding, with her at 7:45. Right? And I was like, I'll kill you people. And they were like, what? Island time. It's who we are. It's part of our identity. And I'm like, that's just, you guys are weird. And therein lies another issue. We may blame certain behaviors or be offended by certain behaviors that we consider culturally appropriate in one place, but not in another, right? Okay, so we've used ethnic identity, or not we, when I say we, people have used ethnic identity as a source for conflict. I mean, you've heard about Bosnia, right? So you have the Croats and the Serbs. They were killing each other over who was Croat and who was Serb, right? Sunni Shiite, right now, people are dying as we speak. When we started this class, there were more people alive than there will be by the time we finish this class because of ethnic identification. People die every second based on ethnic identity. It's serious stuff. So we may have what we call genocide, or sometimes they call it ethnocide. Ethnocide is when one group tries to wipe out another group who has a certain ethnic identity. Very, very common. People often trying to wipe out the Romani. You guys know them as gypsies. See them come and kill them. You know that historically, just about every group on the planet, except for Americans, have been targeted for ethnocide. Actually, I take that back. We were targeted for ethnocide, which just wasn't very successful. They only got 3,000. But other than that, they didn't get millions of us. No pogroms for us. But this is trying to establish or trying to get rid of an entire ethnic or entire religious group. It starts small. It starts with misunderstandings. It starts with those prejudices we were talking about before, right? Even we don't mean to be that way. Sometimes we are that way, for better or for worse. So Rwanda was some of you have seen Hotel Rwanda? This was a huge ethnic conflict. It was awful. In 1994, basically Rwanda kind of blew off. And it was a conflict between the Hutu and the Tutsi. Ethnic conflict. Each group was attempting to basically decimate the other. Over 1 million people died in that conflict alone. And this was all done at a very local level. So the whole nation only had 7 million people in it, so they killed 1/7 of the population behind this. Also, just as a side note, the bonobo chimpanzee, our closest relative genetically, lived in Rwanda. And they wiped out almost all of them in the wild. They were bystanders of a war because people were starving, and so they were eating what's called bushmeat. In this case, they were eating our closest relatives. Disgusting. So we had more people die than an atom bomb going off. We had more people die than died at 9/11. We had 1 million people die in a single, well, it was not quite a single year. It was a couple of years, but 1994 was when it was the worst. People killed other people up close and personal, not with guns, but with machetes. They hacked each other to death with machetes over ethnic identity. So yes, lest we ever think it's not real, let us remember that people died in this every day. So, 100 days was the worst. It actually existed over longer than 100 days. The 100 days is when you get the worst part of the conflict. So there you see it, April 6, 1994 to July 18, 1994. These are fields and fields of dead people. It was horrible. And I highly recommend you see Hotel Rwanda. Although I also recommend that when you see it, A, you haven't eaten a very heavy meal before you see it. And B, you have a whole box of Kleenex, because you're going to need a whole box. So we have Hutu and Tutsi who come together. One thing you don't see very often, and this is something that I think is kind of important to recognize, is that there was a biological difference between the two groups, even though they intermarried as groups before. Their origin groups are some of the tallest and smallest people in the world. So the Hutu are the close in height to each other. They were not that far off, but they see themselves as coming from these vastly different origin populations. Vastly different. Now, the greatest number of people in the population are Hutu. And so they made up 85% of the population. The Tutsi made up 15% of the population. And the said about 50% of the population died. It was almost all Tutsi. Almost all Tutsi died. They just couldn't withstand the attacks by the Hutus. Awesome. People chasing you down with machetes because you were Tutsi. Imagine right now that whatever ethnicity you are, it suddenly became okay to hunt you. In fact, preferred to hunt you. This is something that we've heard about other groups. Like we've heard about this happening to the Jews, and we've heard about this happening to the Croats, and we've heard about this happening. But try to imagine for a second what it would be like to be that group, where today you had a home and food and you were safe, and tomorrow you were prey. That's impossible for us to wrap our head around. unless we are survivors of those very kinds of events. So when we have ethnicity, if you remember that part of the definition is it excludes us from others unless they share the same ethnicity that we have. So it becomes us versus them. And this is sort of a typical thing to do within our own brains, is to divide us versus them. There is no such thing as a you without there being a me. Or the other way around, there's no such thing as a me without there being a you. So it does result in certain types of separation, especially with groups like our group only marries our people, right? I have a friend who is Iranian, and she is marrying a guy who's Argentinian, and her family is pissed. They're so mad. She should be marrying an Iranian. How dare she marry this Argentinian? And I'm like, well, because they love each other. That's how dare. I can't wait to go to it. Dance. But, my husband is a fabulous dancer, so it's going to be much fun. So when we start looking at how the us versus them mentality works, one of the things we have to keep in mind is ethnicity can be used as a justification for distribution of resources. Sometimes, like we are here at a Hispanic serving institution, we get more resources because of that condition. Sometimes it's a justification for not providing any resources, for taking things away. So when we start looking at conflicts like this, one of the first things we need to look at is what resources give the shortest supply. Because if you can make the other people who you're competing with for that same resource less than you, or even non-human, which is typically what we do, and make them less human or non-human in our eyes, it becomes much easier to commit acts of genocide or to take things away from them. So if we look at what was happening, again, we're going to go back to resources. So in Rwanda, for a while, they were basically a Belgian-held territory, and while they were a Belgian-held territory, the Belgians looked at the Tutsi as the more superior population. And if you were Tutsi, you got faster promotions and better access to jobs, better access to resources. Remember, they only make up 15% of the population. So 85% of the population was sort of denied any kind of access to resource. And what the Belgians were doing was, making access friends with a local group in order to gain entree into the next group. But they really went around it poorly, because they did that whole play one group off of the other group, which has been very successful in colonialism across the world. It worked in the US, it worked all kinds of places. But in this case, it really backfired. Yes, they were able to maintain their own elevated position, because if you're the one, just think about this as being a playground fight for a second. Let's take it away from the serious for a second. If you're the kingmaker on the playground, if you're the guy who everybody knows who's popular because you said they were popular, that also keeps you popular, right? If everybody wants your favor, that's how you maintain your own social position, is by being the kingmaker. You don't have to be king. You just have to be king. So, in this case, that's really what they were doing. So, basically the Belgians used national identity and made these national identity cards. And on the cards was their ethnic identity. First, on the card itself, they have the person's ethnicity. And so you couldn't even say you were one or the other, because on your card it said whether you were Hutu or whether you were Tutsi. And it's surprising that the fight took as long to happen as it did. The Belgians are out in 1962. The genocide occurs in 1994. But they're still using those identity cards in 1994. So we think that it actually was triggered by what the Belgians did. It just had a very long fuse before it went on. So, now some groups may be able to make their ethnicity an opportunity, right? If you are in a group where suddenly the thing, if you're in a society where you're like, all I want in the world are Korean food trucks, and you're Korean, you're like, I shall make a Korean food truck. My nephew and I keep teasing because we love tacos, right? You cannot get a taco in Germany. You can't. There's no tacos that don't exist. You can get all manner of Middle Eastern foods, because there's a lot of Turkish immigrants. You can get you can get a really nice Indian curry. Can't get a taco. And so he was like, I'm going to learn all about business here, and then I will return to Germany and open a taco stand. And I said, this is never going to work. You can't open a taco stand. He's like, why? I know much about tacos. No one's going to buy that you know anything about tacos there, German boy. Right? Now, if you were brown, you could lie to them and tell them you were Mexican and get away with making tacos, but nobody believed you. I had a boyfriend once who was a sushi chef. He was very, very good at what he did. But he was a white boy with blue eyes. He dyed his hair black in hopes that people would think he was a little more Japanese. He couldn't. He was trained properly, went to school, had a degree in sushi chef. Nobody would hire him. He was the wrong ethnicity to be sushi chef. Poor guy. That's all right. He's the right ethnicity to be Pilates teacher, which is what he is today. So sometimes we can show appreciation, like you may decide, oh, like I love things with sugar skulls on them, right? It's crazy, love things with sugar skulls on them. And I will buy things that have sugar skulls on them. I do tend to buy them from people who look legit for selling me a sugar skull item. Although actually my favorite sugar skull sweater, which you guys will see as soon as it's cold enough to get sweaters on, which I can't wait. I got from Japanese. But it was awesome. So we get this idea of these ethnic tourism, ethnic heritage areas. Think about Olvera Street down in LA, right? This ethnic area. Or maybe you've been to Koreatown or Japantown, which is, by the way, where the little creepy dude who sells awesome sugar ball sweaters is in Japantown. Right? Pardon me? Yeah, in Tokyo, which has the Japanese Heritage Center in it, and across from the Japanese Heritage Center, the best ramen place in all of Los Angeles. His name is Mr. Ramen. Go eat at Mr. Ramen. I recommend it. You and $6 have never spent such a good time together. So, we like to go to these ethnic heritage centers as a tourist thing. When I was in Miami, I keep wanting to call it Miami because I'm talking to my mom, and my mom is German. It's not Miami, it's Miami. My husband wanted to see Little Havana. We drove around Little Havana and we were like, no, never mind, this is scary, keep driving. There was nowhere to walk or like have a sandwich. It was just, but people go there all the time to these ethnic heritage places. I don't know if you know this, Norco is also an ethnic heritage place. It's considered a heritage city within the U.S. I know, you're like, nope. 1,000 times no. This is not a heritage city. This is the place we escaped from. Yeah, no, it turns out this is kind of a bastion of a certain kind of American identity. Cowboy. It's called Horsetown, USA. You know that, right? You've seen the sign when you drove in. There used to be more horses than people in the town. There were more horses. Horses outnumbered people. That is no longer true. However, horse ownership per capita is still way above the national average, which is none. Most people, if you say how many horses do you own, the answer is no horses. You say that in Morocco, people say 3, 5, you know, oh, I have 4. Oh, I want some love, dude. No one's giving me that. All right. So, here's another one, this idea of the ethno-corporation. I'm sure you're all familiar with the native identity as basically somewhere around, this is about time has passed and hasn't it? About 40 years ago, a group of Native Americans figured out there was a loophole in the treaty system that they had signed with the U.S. in the 1800s. And this loophole actually created sovereign nations. So the tribal lands were considered separate, not owned by the U.S., and therefore were territories / nations of their own. You drive down the 15, you get off in Temecula, you make a left, you've actually left the United States of America the moment you step foot on Pechanga Way. It is the Pechanga Nation. It's their spot. If I could go in forever. I do work for them. Periodically, they have stuff they need done, and they don't have their own, they don't have a fire department, they don't have a police department, well, actually, striking all that together, but that didn't exist as it was its own nation state. But that's also why they can have casinos, because technically, you technically left the U.S. when you cross it. Not really, right? Like you can see the freeway, but you technically left the U.S. So, and of course, they're doing very, very well because to own a casino means that you are constantly raking in money, and they have been making passive economic prosperity. I was invited as a speaker once to San Manuel to visit with the Morongo. They call themselves tribes, but that's actually the wrong word. They're a nation state. And the tribe sounds so much less threatening than a nation. I was brought there to speak about what the coroner's office does, and we suddenly called a human rights violator and committed a genocide. And I'm like, what just happened? But that's how they saw me, because I disinterred them. So I'm a dirty violator. But before they did this to me, which by the way, it was really awful. Like they told me I was coming to talk about this, they told me don't bring a PowerPoint, it's just a lunch, it's just a casual thing. I get there, there's 6 other speakers, they have professional PowerPoints, like they literally sandbagged me. And I was like, all right, no problem. I will speak in a native way, and I will speak from my heart, and I will speak things that are important. And I came up to the microphone and I said, I come to speak from my heart. And you know, I did it the whole, exactly in the respective native way, and was like, huh, anthropologists, suck it. It was awful. But before they did that, they took me around to their houses because they wanted me to see their home. And they had indoor-outdoor pools. Like you could swim from inside the house, outside the house. You could dive in and come up on the outside of the house. And they had their Escalades, and they had all, and I was kind of like, mind you, when they did this to me, I was making $8,000 a year. And they kept expressing to me how their ethnicity was being subjugated and how they were being oppressed and all of these things. And I had to tell you that, in all honesty, I was like, oppress me. This is oppression. I mean, I could totally use a pool that does the thing. But in my long-term experience, I actually didn't see this absolute difference. But I could definitely see that the differences between the haves and the have-nots made a huge impact on the group as a whole. So we have this idea of assimilation, but we also have this idea of multiculturalism. So you have to act like an American or we don't like you. but you also, we have to respect your ethnicity as part of what we do, right? If you have someone who around you is failing to act American, you call them on it. So, you know, I already told you in class, when my nephew sits right next to me on the couch and I go, whoa, wait. You know, when he kisses a male friend on the cheek goodbye and I go, I mean, it's cool, but could you mean that? He's like, oh, okay. Okay, and we mock them and we make fun of them for not acting like Americans. But we also want people to respect, we want people to walk around and say, you peoples, you can't be Native American anymore. You can't be Mexican anymore. You can't be Salvadorian. You can't be Argentinian. You can't be French. You can't be those things anymore. You'd be like, oh yeah? Watch how frickin' insert the blank I'm going to become on your ass. Right? You will not take my ethnic identity away from me. So we have this idea is that all of us come together, this melting pot, and we are good for it, right? Like, we all become more for adding the extra ethnicities, but we do have expectations of what that turns out. So, and not everybody sees it as good. There are folks that when they migrate to the U.S. and they get this forced assimilation, be American, they see it as horrible, absolutely horrible, and I understand that. Okay, so if we look at the relationship of ethnicity to the nation, so what a state is this is going to organize political, economic, and military control. A nation state means that it's not geographically bounded, so it can have discontinuous territories, and people have a sense of culture and ancestry. Nationalism is when you have pride within the nation. Nationalism can, of course, be a building thing. After 9/11, do you know so many American flags? Certainly all of this nationalism wasn't just patriotism, it was nationalism. Patriotism can be ridiculous, but nationalism can work. And but we've also seen nationalism go the wrong way. Germany, 1938. Bad, right? So ethnicities aren't necessarily restricted by political boundaries or by which nation it's associated with, right? They're, again, so much more fluid. So imagined communities is an important part of all of this. Imagined communities are about people who associate within a group for a common sense of community that may or may not have anything to do with what they're associated with. I just went to a Scottish festival. This was an imagined community. They see themselves as all part of this being Scottish, when maybe no one's even ever actually been there before. So, and within our own U.S., we have this imagined community, and Americans, if they're from Iowa, we still have this shared ethnic identity, and that's not necessarily true. That's pretty much where I'm going to have to stop with you on imagined communities, because it's not as much what I do. However, if you'd like to know more about imagined communities, April Mejia, who is our other cultural anthropology teacher, this is what she did in her MA thesis on. Hers was all about imagined communities, particularly about being Irish. So this idea that they have all, we're Irish, have something in common with Duke County Court, right? So she was looking at that, and that's pretty much where I have to stop. All right, what metaphor is